Good morning. So I'm here today. We're going to do a second case study for OCR GCSE geography, and we're looking at a river landform, a river valley and a drainage basin with landforms and human activity. And the one that I'm going to case study today is the River Tees. The reason I'm going to pick the River Tees is that it demonstrates in a short distance pretty much most of the major things that we'd expect to see in a river basin. So the case studies split down into a few sections. Going to go through an introduction, looking at the general location and some facts. The second section going to be looking at the landforms that are in the River Tees Valley. The third section will be looking at the processes that operate there. And finally, we'll look at human activity and the management of the drainage basin system. And the trick for this is to press pause between each section so that you can kind of digest what's being said. There's loads of stuff online about this. There's a boy called Elliot who did a program back in the 90s, which is absolutely brilliant. Just YouTube River Tees, and he does it from source to mouth. Yeah. So I'm going to do an introduction first. Here we go. So in terms of the River Tees, it's a river valley in the northeast of England, and it rises in Crossfell, which is in the Pennines, maybe about 500 metres above sea level, and it starts off in moorland. That's what Crossfell is. And then the River Tees flows for about 137 kilometres towards the North Sea, so it flows from west to east, out from the Pennines down to sea level. It has very distinctive upper course, middle course and a lower course with an estuary. It goes through the city of Middlesbrough and near to Darlington, and also Stockton-on-Tees is there, and eventually flows out into the North Sea. So that's a bit about the river basin. Part 2, we're going to talk about the landforms that we see there. So if we look at those three areas, the upland River Tees, the middle course and lower course, and we'll pick a landform from each area. And again, if you go onto YouTube, there's loads of stuff on there, but you're here. So in the upper course, obviously dominated by vertical erosion, as the water's trying to cut down to sea level, so creating V-shaped valleys. And probably one of the most famous waterfalls in the UK is found on the River Tees, and that is High Force Waterfall. Now, High Force Waterfall is 20 metres high, and like most waterfalls, it's created when you have two different bands of rock. There is a tougher whinstone rock, which is an igneous rock, and it's actually we find that again where Hadrian's Wall is, and there it's called Windsill. But at High Force Waterfall, the whinstone igneous rock is the hard rock, and below it is a softer limestone, and as the water travels towards sea level, it erodes the rock, and eventually there's a gorge as well. So it's a very famous waterfall. When we get to the middle course, the river starts to get wider. It starts to moves more laterally, and we get to a place called Yarm in the middle course. And Yarm is very famous because it's within a meander of the River Tees, and Yarm is sat right in there, literally in the loop of the meander. A very classic bit of settlement geography there as well. Meanders caused by lateral erosion, water starting to move side to side, eroding in the outer bank, depositing on the inside bank. And then finally, our final landform that we choose to look at is the floodplain in the lower course. So by the time we get to the lower course, all of that movement is now lateral, and the river sort of stops meandering, but it's got a huge floodplain, and that's where we find the Teesside estuary. So part 3, going to look at processes. Now, I'm not going to sort of go into detail about how these processes happen. I'm just going to sort of go through which ones are apparent. So we've got all the erosional processes in the creation of the waterfalls, the V-shaped valleys. So attrition, hydraulic action, abrasion, corrosion. There's obviously transportation of sediment. Some sediment rolls through traction, some bounces through siltation, some is floating suspension, and some is dissolved as solution. And then we have deposition as we get towards the lower course. The smallest materials deposited first. So we've got those erosion. We've got those erosional and other processes. There's also a lot of weathering, and also apart from that, we've got climate plays quite a big role. So the rain comes in from the west, from the Atlantic, falling on the Pennines. So I think you get 1,500 millimetres of rain per year. But by the time you get to the east coast, rainfall is only 500 millimetres. So that has quite an important factor. And temperature is also warmer, maybe 5 degrees warmer in the lower course than the upper course, and that will affect weathering. So on to the final section, which is looking at human activity. Now, there's lots of tourism in the area. I know it's definitely a place I'd go and see if I was up that way. There's also the estuary at Teesside has an ICI petrochemical plant, and the oil is refined. There's a lot of other bigger industries as well, particularly back in the Victorian times. There's also a lot of farmland, starting with sort of sheep farming to start with, and then we move down to other pastoral farming and then arable crops as we move into the lower course. But in terms of management, the reason this is a good case study is there's been a number of ways that the Tees has been managed. So I'm going to go through 3 ways. Way number 1, Cowgreen Reservoir. So that provides water for a lot of the people that live in the area. So it's quite a heavily populated area down towards the cities. So Cowgreen Reservoir stores 40 million litres of water is the guess. It's built in 1917. It's 1/4 of a mile wide, so that's right in the upper course, not far from the source. Then down where the meanders were around Yarm, the Victorians actually, they got fed up with the transporting all the material. So what they ended up is they started blowing through the loops and meanders to straighten the river. So the River Tees continues to be one of the most managed rivers around, particularly in its lower course, and the Victorians did that. And then the third lot of management is probably that the Tees Barrage is a brilliant example. So it costs £54 million, and essentially what it does is it controls the flow of water to prevent flooding. Some barrages can create hydroelectric power, but the Tees Barrage, it basically creates a consistent high tide between Yarm and Darlington. Yarm and Stockton, and because of this high tide, they have water sports there, and they can really mitigate any issues with the flooding of the River Tees. So there's a bit of a whistle-stop tour. That's from memory, so there might be some inaccuracies, but that is a really good case study. See you in a bit.